It's really, really nice to be here. It's weird visiting local parties like this. Mostly, you know, I really enjoy traveling around the country and actually visiting real places. And yeah, I'm seeing so many familiar faces from previous visits on Zoom calls like this. But every single time I'm just sat here in my ordinary flat without any kind of train trip or nicer views or visits. So it's very strange. It's really, really nice to be here visiting Eastern Green Party. I'm going to run through a few of the reasons why you're my favourite region. All regions are obviously my favourite region because I'm the National Green Party leader, but each region is my favourite for different reasons. So, I mean, Eastern Green Party, I don't know if, probably not many of you know this, although I've probably gossiped about it on visits. When I was a kid, we didn't really have money for proper paid holidays. So we had a friend of my grandma's who had a very small little cottagey thing on Mersey Island. So we used to go there every single year for our holiday. So that was like, that bit of Essex was my second home. And honestly, my family were obsessed with the place. We used to come and we used to visit the beach, obviously, go to the museum every single time, and swim in the black water, and also play in the amazing wetland habitats that are all around the island, which obviously as a kid I didn't call wetland habitats, I called them the marshes and the dikes. But yeah, there's incredible amounts of wildlife. One thing that really sort of gave me a sense of what sort of nature could be like was these visits every single year that we could come to Mersey Island. So yeah, part of my heart is in the Eastern region. Plus, I've been to Norwich more times than I can actually remember, because Norwich has been such a stalwart green place for such a long time. Oh, Peter's actually there. Hello, Peter. Turn your camera to face the window. So yeah, no, one day I'll be back there again. But yeah, Norwich, I love Norwich, and the amount of times I've knocked on doors in Norwich and been in elections and by-elections where we've gained seats, and also where we've come so close. I absolutely love Norwich. And also I want to give a big mention to Colchester, because when I was all those years ago principal speaker, I came to Colchester for target ward canvassing a long time ago, and we came, I can't remember the actual margin, but we came really close to winning a seat right back then. And I'm so pleased when I was looking at the election results last May to see that we've broken through and won that seat on Colchester Council at long last. So yeah, well done to that. Other things, I mean, obviously in the 2019 elections, Eastern Region has been an absolute star. I mean, you know, obviously you've got the mid-Suffolk election where we're all just going, how many seats did they win? How many did you get? Absolutely incredible. And obviously Bury St Edmunds following that up with the most enormous 7% swing in the general election this year, which was absolutely brilliant to see. And I was really pleased to come and visit and talk with Helen and just see how brilliant the campaign was there. And yeah, obviously we've got the shining lights also. Witham and Braintree had fantastic results, and Peterborough where Julie won a seat, and then Nicola, I think she's here, followed up with just a tremendous win. So there's just the spreading out of the success and the growth that we're seeing in some of the areas in Eastern Region is fantastic. And then obviously you broke through onto, and I'm going to count them there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 new councils where we broke through is an amazing achievement as well. So yeah, Eastern Region, really pleased to be here, and actually really impressed with the amount of people who are on this call as well. It's just brilliant to see the turnout today. So I'm here to talk about, I'm supposed to talk for 10 minutes and I've just done that already. I'm here to talk about the big picture, the ways that we try and build a better tomorrow in the face of enormous crises. And I think I've been reflecting on this in my local paper column as well, about the hugely perilous watershed times that we're currently living through. I think that, you know, the coronavirus crisis is a huge national tragedy, an ongoing tragedy where we've already seen this number's ridiculous. Over 60,000 people who've died who shouldn't have died, plus all the people who've been hospitalized, who've had terrible trauma from catching this disease and are going to take a very long time to recover. This is a national trauma that I'm not sure has landed, and amidst it we've seen the most appalling lack of leadership from the national government, the kind of advice and leadership in the sense of like family leadership that you want to see from a prime minister who's there saying, oh, I'm standing by you, I understand your pain, here is what we're going to do, let's all stand together, let's look after each other. We saw tiny glimpses of that at the beginning, and since then it's been mistake after mistake after mistake, and some of the worst, I think, reactions and defensiveness and non-collegiate behaviour from the government that really astounds me. It really is. You'd expect any government to step up, like we've seen with New Zealand. I love the New Zealand example because Jacinda Ardern is widely seen as one of the best leaders in the world on this crisis, and she does not govern that country alone. It's a small country, but it has a government of more than one person, and in fact there are Greens in the government there, and I think it really is a shining example of how collegiate, mature leadership can operate to save lives, and we just haven't seen that from this government in this country, and I think Greens have an awful lot to say about the character of leadership that you see within countries, as well as the practical things that should have been done. And of course, we've seen the unequal impacts of the coronavirus crisis on different communities, divided by mainly class and race, and it's been hugely exposing about the inadequacies of our system as a whole. And yes, it's a watershed not just of our economic system, but also for the direction of our rights at the moment. This is not a separate issue from the coronavirus crisis. The impacts on Black and other ethnic minorities, people of the coronavirus crisis has shown the racial divides, but also we've seen direct problems. Police racism particularly has been exposed. We've seen an extraordinary wave of new protests and new solidarity with Black people across the country, the amazing scenes in Bristol, and threats. We've also seen threats to the LGBT community. It's Pride today. Normally I'd be on the streets of London celebrating Pride. And in the midst of all of this, we're also seeing a culture war from the government. We're seeing them threatening not just to cancel reforms that were promised to rights for trans people, but also to roll back on some of the provisions that are there in the Equality Act. And the LGBTIQA plus Greens have been doing some sterling work standing up against that, and that battle will need to be fought. So yeah, we've seen not only economic and class differences leading to more deaths amongst different groups, we've also seen the government trying to stoke up division, trying to get the police to act as a military force and enforce enforcement against protests instead of supporting the rights to free speech, with the very, very honourable exception of Bristol there. We've seen some genuine problems emerging from police racism, but also denials of the fact that there might still be institutional racism in the police. I sit on the Police and Crime Committee in London, and I've questioned the commissioner there about this, and she's been really, really poor and really saying that she doesn't think there's a problem, that other factors are at play apart instead of bias within the police. This isn't true. We absolutely need to see a re-examining of the role of policing. And then, whilst all this has been going on, our climate deadlines have not been melting away. The job of sorting out carbon neutrality by 2030 just gets harder every single day that we delay. And I think as Greens, we are there standing up for sticking to climate targets, making sure that we take action quicker than ever before, and we'll certainly not be watering down our commitments to climate action in the way that we've seen some parties threatening to do in the recent days. I mean, just to divert for a second, I hate the fact that it was all too easy to imagine with someone within a Labour Party HQ meeting just literally saying, you know, we only really said that to squeeze the Green vote during the general election. Now let's get back to business as usual. I mean, that is genuinely something I can imagine them saying. And this is a real wake-up call to people, I hope, of the need that if you want green action, you've got to vote green. You've got to put some of us into the room. So there's the context. The context is perilous. It is a watershed moment. And in the National Green Party office, we've been thinking very, very hard about how we mobilise the members that we have, the councillors that we have around the country, and our platform at a national level to make a difference on all of these issues. So I've got a big range of National Green Party actions and things to get involved in to promote. Caroline Lucas has never stopped talking about the Green New Deal for about 10 years now. And she's been very, very active in putting together policy proposals and pushing them forwards at a parliamentary level. She started off producing this Green Steps to Better programme. And here we've got, you know, different things that absolutely need to be done in the crisis. What we bail out, the choices we have of how we bail out different industries, whether or not we focus on things like making sure our food industry and our local economies are strengthened, or we go and bail out all the aviation and fossil fuel industries. These are choices being made now, which are going to have huge, huge ramifications for the future. Whether or not we carry on investing in green energy, whether we do the Green New Deal that we talked about, whether we guarantee people's housing rights, all of that is in Caroline's excellent Green Steps to Better stuff. And then she's also been in the parliamentary group for a Green New Deal. They've launched today a fantastic new programme called Reset, and that is a conversation that's being started by that group of parliamentarians, which includes Caroline, includes Jenny Jones, includes people from other parties as well. And they are going to be going around the country, metaphorically, I think, in virtual ways, and having conversations about the priorities people want for resetting the country in the wake of the climate crisis. So please go follow that, go and get involved, sign up for those events. Let's make sure there's strong green voices in all of those events around the country, and that we're speaking up for reducing inequality, for proper climate action, and all those things that we were talking about during the general election, huge investments in things, and against austerity, and I'll come back to that later. Coming up this week, we're going to have a really good piece of work that we've been doing with the NGOs around the country, looking at the people and groups that might slip through the gaps, that we're in a crisis situation, you know, big changes are being made, what people are being forgotten, who are speaking, listening to people who are speaking up for different groups and saying, let's leave no one behind as we rebuild. And there's a whole range of different actions and demands in there, which I hope that Greens around the country will help to amplify. So please look out for that on Monday. But just to trail one particular thing that's one of my obsessions, speaking as I am from my rented flat, which is renters' rights. We've got some amazing changes have been made to whether or not people can be evicted from their homes, whether or not people's right to a roof over their heads if they're homeless is respected. We've seen so many people brought in to having a safe roof over their heads temporarily. We cannot let that whittle away, and we must deal, very importantly, with the debts that renters have built up. We must campaign really hard in the next few weeks for rent forgiveness. This is something that's not currently Labour policy, but if we can get a united opposition around that, that'll be fantastic. And then Greens of Colour, all of last week, ran a fantastic set of campaigns around 5 demands for racial justice, which I'll just wave at you now, which include scrapping the NHS surcharge, ending the indefinite detention of migrants, an excellent letter from 3 of our fantastic Green councillors demanding the removal of racist abuse from politics, because that's far too prevalent, work on the education and history curriculums, and getting that all-important inquiry into deaths amongst Black and other ethnic minority people during the coronavirus crisis. So go to the Greens of Colour website, and there's petitions and actions you can take there. So that's really all really important work that we've been doing. And then we've also been working with councillors. One of our missions during the crisis has been to amplify the work that's going on at a local level. I know that so many councillors have been involved in local community work around mutual aid, around food banks, about making sure that people who might fall through the gaps are still supported during the crisis. And that work we've tried to amplify. And we've also been looking at the need for community level public health work, the tracking and tracing that shouldn't be done through privacy unfriendly centralized apps and should be done through local communities. We've been meeting, so me and Jonathan and Amelia and the AGC chairs, we've been meeting members who are councillors on a fortnightly basis and talking about local action, sharing motions to go through councils, the questions that we've been asking councils, the demands we've been making for scrutiny to continue and council meetings to carry on. And that's been a really important part of our work. So just to finally leave you with a couple of things. So watch out for that thing on Monday that's coming out about leaving no one behind. But our other big challenges, I think, are going to be around policing work. And I think there is a big thing that we should be doing nationally to campaign for rethinking how we do policing from first principles. If you Google the policing by consent definition, the government has helpfully provided a set of principles that are really ancient, actually. They're originally called the Peel Principles because they were introduced when there wasn't a police force. Having a standing police force was regarded as something new, something that wasn't necessarily, you know, the right thing when your liberty is your focus. And so rethinking why we have the police, what their purpose is, and trying to get some new principles in place that actually do mean that everyone's focused on safety, that the police recognise that they are just ordinary citizens and are not a military force there to enforce against us all the time, but are actually there to work with communities and prevent crime and improve safety as their main goals. I think that's really important. But in the next few weeks, there's going to be a huge argument to be had about austerity. The idea that we spend money in an emergency was well accepted, even by this Conservative government, and they're going to turn around very soon and start telling us there's no money left. And in the 2008 banking crisis, what we saw was austerity that absolutely wrecked the lives of many people who depend on things like welfare and benefits. People who get into trouble had their support withdrawn. Making people destitute was regarded as a normal thing to do, and we know that lives were lost as a result of that. And we also saw green and climate action regarded as a nice to have, that they would have to drop for the time being. There was no money left for this kind of thing. Now, this was absolutely incorrect. We should be investing in society, investing in the future, investing in green and social things during a difficult time. And that is what governments are there to do. And this is an argument that actually at this very high and big level, we're all going to be having to have in the next few weeks. And I mean arguments, I mean, you know, let's advocate for this at the park, at the school gates, wherever you see people, with your friends and family, because there's going to be a big propaganda war fought to argue for continued austerity, for cuts in spending, and we cannot afford to let that happen again. So that's my mission to you in the Eastern region. Keep going, keep winning more seats, winning more people, Greens in the room to make that difference. But also we've got a big conversation to be having with our friends and our neighbours about building back better, about building a more just, a more socially, more racially, more environmentally just future. And this is a big task for every single member of the party coming up. So I'm ready for your questions now. I've been trying not to look at the chat the whole time that I've been speaking. I'm sure there are some excellent points already made. But yeah, ready to listen and see what you think about the things I've put forward and what else you think we should be doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sian, for that. That was fantastic to hear. Warren, obviously regarding the economy and obviously what the Conservatives are going to be talking about over the next few weeks, saying we've got no more money. Does sound very familiar though. It's deja vu. So we will go straight into some questions that we have. We do have quite plenty of time. And the first question actually comes from Ben Price, who is a Norwich councillor. And he asked the question, swift away from the left and their commitments to the environment without inheriting the internal problems of that party.
I didn't hear the first 10 seconds of what you said there. I don't know if it was my connection or yours.
Am I back? Am I back?
You are?
Oh, there we go. Did you hear any of that?
I heard the very end. I'm really sorry.
No, it's Wi-Fi. My Wi-Fi is not great either. So the question was, fingers crossed this actually works. How do we take advantage of Labour's swift away from the left and their commitments to the environment without inheriting the internal problems of the party?
Well, I mean, that is a good question. I think there is a real sense that Keir Starmer's main focus is going to be those people that they lost in the Red Wall, and that actually there's some analysis that's been done by, I think, the Electoral Reform Society that we've been looking at, which shows that the members, the voters that deserted Labour were of the authoritarian side of the left. And that the more libertarian, I don't know if you're aware of the political compass and the two different axes, but the more libertarian left people didn't desert Labour. And I think there's signs in some of the ways that Keir Starmer has already reacted to events that show that he's making a proper pitch for people who are more authoritarian. And that does massively open up space for us to our much more naturally libertarian side, where we stick up for human rights, where we don't want fierce police enforcement on things like the statues. I don't know if you saw, he said that the statue toppling in Bristol was I think completely wrong, I think is how he reacted to it. No, it wasn't. It was amazing. It was a moment in history where something absolutely had to happen. The people acted, the police understood, the police officer in charge of the operation was saying, this was symbolically important, and it was quite clear that this was something that we shouldn't be interfering in. And yeah, completely. The alternative would have been to have a ring of police officers protecting a racist statue. I mean, really, that was not what you wanted. So for Keir Starmer to make that statement at that time, I think, is a real sign that there is, the libertarian, the rights protecting, the people side of our party is set to attract many more people who are being alienated by this behaviour. I don't think it's a massive risk to our party. We have a strong culture within our party of respecting everybody, and I think this is something that, it may well be that if new members come in and are not being like that, it'll be up to us to stand up and say, this is not how it is here. But I think, we are strong, and you are good people who will be prepared to do that and be good allies to everybody if we find that people come in with views that we don't agree with. But I think it has real potential to strengthen our campaigning, and the people that will support the kinds of campaigns that Greens of Colour have been running, for example. Those are potential new members for us, and people we can strengthen and diversify our party as a result. So I think this is it's all basically positive, and I think we shouldn't be worried.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Sian. I will, hopefully my internet doesn't want to crash on me again. This is going to be fun. So the next question comes from Dave Palmer. What is the one thing you would say in a council chamber that has passed a climate emergency motion and makes the right noises but doesn't prioritise? Asking for a friend, wink.
It is like I said in the end of my talk just now, it is up to us to show that investment is the right thing to do now. Councils should not be putting off any green measures, particularly not, I think, on housing. There's a lot of changes that have been made to where people live and work at the moment, and there's a lot more people who are having to work at home. There's a lot of threats to people's incomes, which I think genuinely means we're approaching this winter a fuel poverty crisis. So if there's one thing that I think will actually win around people of all stripes in councils, is investment in retrofitting and improving energy efficiency within people's homes. So yeah, if they're offering you intransigence, start stressing the social benefits and the upcoming risks that there are to people's lives from not taking action on this, and start stressing to them that every single penny you spend now as a council will be money you do not have to spend later on things like social care, on emergency payments and all of that kind of thing. So yeah, get in there, make that case, and I think councils of all kinds will listen to us because we speak sense.
Thanks for that response, Charlotte. I think the next question kind of follows on really onto what you were talking about. So Nikki Clark asks, there is a huge number of people, both general public and local councillors, who still seem completely unaware of the looming crisis and the changes that are going to have to happen, and the urgency of this. How can we educate everyone with clear facts about what is ahead if we are to continue on the path we're currently on, and so they are more willingly to make the changes?
I think, the answer to that is just basically constantly. I mean, we do not lack evidence. The Committee on Climate Change this week, I'm very bad on which days things happen at the moment, released their updated report, where there was lots of criticism for the shape of development, the amount of car dependency that still resulted, and the slow pace of investment in alternatives, and all of those kinds of things. So I think we're not short of the evidence that we need to push for the urgency of this, but it is a constant battle. People are very easily distracted, and like I said earlier with Labour, around the election, you'd have been forgiven for being like, whoa, another green policy from Labour, crikey, that's really impressive. It's kind of disappeared now. This is something where we can win the argument for a bit, but there's always the risk of backsliding. This is the importance of having Greens in the room to not let this happen. I think my local council, I'm a lone councillor in Camden, and just me being there in the room staring at them across the chamber stops them from backsliding, keeps them on track, keeps them wanting to outflank me at all times, because I'm constantly there. If they think we're only there at election time, then they'll make those promises at election time and then disappear. So if you're not currently elected, it's harder, because you can't just sit there and go, you actually have to keep campaigning and making sure they listen. But the public are with us. There's been some amazing polling, during this crisis, an amazing economic and health crisis. And yet when you poll people for what the most important issues are, the environment is still right up there as one of the top issues. When you ask people what should the recovery be like from the coronavirus crisis, people say a green recovery, to the extent of, I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but it's like 80% of people are like, yep, the green stuff, do not forget that, it is important. So the work we've done campaigning, with Extinction Rebellion, with the green groups, on the urgency of this deadline, the 2030 deadline, the need to get to carbon neutrality as soon as possible, that hasn't gone away. And I think young people in particular recognise that this deadline falls well within their lifetimes and is something they're not going to let us forget about. So warning them that you do not want the school children invading your council chamber again is a good thing to do, and mobilising public support. Keep getting people signing up to petitions, bring those deputations to the council meetings if you're not elected, and if you are elected, keep bringing those motions and proposals, and keep asking those questions, because it is a constant battle. But at the moment, the public's still with us in a very, very big way. So the door is open for us to keep that pressure on.
No, absolutely. And I think there's been a lot of discussion, not just only around green recovery, but also keeping that agenda at the top on the climate crisis and the environment. And as obviously we've seen in Ireland recently with the Irish Green Party obviously potentially going into government at the moment. But I think obviously you're talking about the economy, and obviously that's going to be a massive focal point for the next few weeks ahead. So there's two questions actually from what I've seen, what we've been given. So the first question comes from Lee. I fear the economy is going to be the sole focus as we come out of the COVID crisis, and the climate crisis will be forgotten in the rush to buy our way out of recession. What is the best way of returning to business unusual? But then to follow on from that, Gaynor has asked, there are many good things that are happening towards a green recovery here and across the world. It can be overwhelming to know what to support and fund. How do we know what is being effective? Is there an international database detailing what has been achieved so far and what still needs to be done so that limited time, money and energy can be given? I assume there's a part missing to that question.
Can Gaynor clarify what she means by an international database of what's been done so far? Do you mean during the coronavirus crisis or in general?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Right, yes, because I used to be a teacher and I did loads of stuff to do with environmental issues over the last 30 years or so. And I do get a bit overwhelmed because there's so many brilliant things to support, donate to, all to do with the green recovery. But you don't know which bits are actually going to make a huge difference. And also when I'm telling other people that don't feel the same as me, there's lots of lists online, the 10 things you can do in your household, but something beyond that. And I love to see how things fit together as a country and the world, because there's all sorts of things going on. So I know the United Nations has a map of what they're doing, but is that just for their work? You know, I'd like to see something where I'll give you an example. The water aid people, when they send you information, they tell you exactly what they've achieved so far and what they still have to do and how much they need. And I like that very sort of precise information. And I think that would appeal to other people from different parties as well.
I think that's a really good question. I mean, I think we're in such an early stage of the recovery building from the crisis that it is hard to point to achievements. But I think the one area where it's really just right in front of you is around transport. And you said, you know, you like to think about how things fit together. And I think the difficulties with transport and the big focus now on making space for walking and safe cycling and giving people options that are not public transport, which has its own problems now in relation to infection control, and the car, which cannot just simply, you know, we cannot do all our journeys by car because it just won't fit onto the streets that we have. Plus there's the carbon impact of that. So I think that work of trying to make sure that transport is catered for in a completely new way and that we reshape our streets so that therefore living on as well as for travelling on, and that there's safe spaces for people to do things, that work really does bring together all the different aspects of the crisis and in a way that's I think really revolutionary, and we've seen extraordinary things being done on that side of things.
Yes.
So I think that's a really good model. And the other thing that I've seen, there's two things. One is donut economics, which is a brilliant framework based on sustainable development goals for focusing on how we use a smaller amount of resources and a smaller economy to actually provide for the needs of everybody. And we carefully consider the extent to which we want to do things that are non-sustainable, because we know that that's pushing us over an environmental limit. So the donut is the safe area where we can do nice things beyond our basic needs, but which don't push us over into the into the danger zone. And I think that's a really nice model for getting local conversations together there. And then the other thing that we're pushing in London, and which is an idea that comes through, and Amsterdam are developing a program of based on donut economics for recovery, which I think is really exciting and worth keeping an eye on. And then the other thing is the 15 minutes city town as well, and that's to do not just with how we travel, but also what things are actually within reach for us. So it's about access to services that are within 15 minutes, either by walking or cycling or a short journey from our homes, to absolutely minimize the need to travel because things are within reach for you. And 15-minute neighborhoods, 15-minute cities are places that have strong communities, that have good community services like, you know, libraries and banks and shops and markets and all of those things that you need, doctors and hospitals, all within 15 minutes of your home. And that's a very, very green concept. And that's been talked about in Paris prior to the crisis, but I think is also a really good model for recovery from the crisis when you're talking about how to plan your towns and a framework within which to talk. So it's well worth keeping an eye on that kind of thing. But no, I can't point you towards a database because it's just like Google.
I've got one. I've already got one sketched out. Going back to the cycling funding that the government gave to local councils, I did write to my councillors and I got a nice reply saying that they were working on it. And I emailed all my friends and put it on Facebook and everything. And then the next week I went for a cycle ride and I saw an area of long grass and meadow being cut back. And then I've heard apparently they're going to put a business park on there. Now, as far as I know, we've already got a business park in that area. I need to follow that up. So I did sort of write something online about that. So what they give with one hand, they're taking away. So that's, you have to sort of keep an eye on that.
Yeah. In terms of things you can do in your local area as well, I mean, really having those conversations with your neighbours, getting the local community forums and tenant associations and groups and groups together to chat about the need for more space for life on the streets, I think is important. What we sometimes find is that there's a bit of a backlash. We want to take away space from cars for walking, for cycling, for parklets, for space on the streets, for eating and drinking. And there's a bit of a lobby that will often spring up and go, oh, that's no good. You can't take away our parking spaces and our car lanes. And again, you know, that's something where having local people who know the area well advocating for this, so that the narrative that it's a top-down thing and they don't understand and the drivers are right doesn't develop is really important. There's a group in London who've started calling it Streets for Life. They're campaigning for Streets for Life. I think that's a really, really good way of putting it. Sorry, we'll have to move to someone else's question now, Gail. I know you're interrogating me, but I'm sure the chair wants to shift to another question.
A little bit. I'm going, oh gosh.
I'm enjoying that chat, but yeah.
No, you have one-to-one. Off you go. We'll leave you to it. You can chat after now. So what we're going to do, actually, because that was obviously a little bit longer than we expected, but those two questions kind of felt quite well to go together. I've decided that we're actually going to continue for another 5 minutes, if that's okay with you, Sian. If you haven't got to be anywhere else, another Zoom call afterwards, maybe. You haven't got to go out anyway. You have to travel anywhere, so that's fine. So we'll extend it by another 5 minutes. We'll go on to about just after 22, so about 42, 43. I'll move on to another question that's come in, actually. So we're getting so many questions coming in, it's quite ridiculous. So I think what I want to hit on actually is Adrian Spurrell, who's our GPRC, non-female identifying, has asked about, it'd be good to hear Sian's views on Extinction Rebellion's political arm, about beyond politics. So I think this is an interesting, and I've seen some of their I think actually it was another member in the Southeast who actually put out some of their website details, and it's a bit interesting to say the least. So what's your views on beyond politics, the XR's political arm?
Well, so the thing they did where they took money from the supermarket and started giving it away, which if you know election law, you're like, is that treating? That was in Camden. They went to my Camden. They went to big Sainsbury's in Camden and did that. And I know Roger Hallam pretty well over the years. I've supported him and lots of actions that he's done when he was trying to raise awareness of for divestment within King's College. They tried to expel him, and there was a bit of a exchange of letters that I took part in there. So I know him, and I'm finding this really confusing, quite honestly. And I think, if you are really, really exercised about climate deadlines, about the need to invest, about the need for every council to be making carbon neutral plans and getting those targets in place. Our record on this, look at the amount of climate emergency motions that the Greens have pushed forward, the extent to which we respected and took part in Extinction Rebellion actions, the extent to which we seek to be that elected politics side of the environmental movement. I don't think there's much to complain about. So anyone who does want to join a political party which is focused on the climate and which is wanting to support human rights and inequality and all of those other things, we're a home for you, and no need to get confused by reading other people's manifesto. I'm really sorry, I don't want to be rude about them, but it's a very confusing website. I agree with you. And yeah, they stood some candidates in the European elections, and people wanted to know, what we were going to do. We just carried on as we were being ourselves, and we did jolly well, and that is what we will continue to do.
Great, thank you very much. Now I'm going to ask a very interesting question. I've been working with the LGBTIQA Greens on their campaign on trans rights that are happening at the moment, and the potential with the government on doing certain things. But someone has asked a question on, as I understand it, there's been no rollback on the Gender Recognition Act, just no movement in either direction. Sian, do you say there has been a rollback? If so, what do you mean?
As I understand it, there was a long government consultation on making reforms to the Gender Recognition Act. Theresa May presented this consultation as, this is what we intend to do, please comment on it. So it was very much a bit like the Section 21 promise that they've given to renters to get rid of the no-fault evictions. It was like, this is what we intend to do, we need to discuss with you the details, and here's a consultation. So as far as I'm concerned, this was a promised reform from the government. At the moment, the changing your gender identity legally within the Gender Recognition Act is overtly medicalised, and there's too many barriers put in place, and that needs to be changed. And that has, as according to rumours, I have to say they are just rumours yet, there's no official announcements, that is something the government is going to backtrack on and not enact the policies that it said it was going to. So that's what I mean. And then additionally, there are rumours that protections within the Equality Act currently for trans people, so trans women being women, that may be changed. And there's rumours about some policies on toilets, which has been tried in America and shown to be absolutely a failure. So I'm not sure what that rumour is about, but none of that is stuff that I think we would support in the Green Party. We've had reform of the Gender Recognition Act in our manifesto for many years now, and we support the changes that were being proposed.
Thank you very much for that, Sian. Obviously, I'm quite conscious of time anyway, so I want to get through just a couple more questions before we move on to our next, well, actually, our break. We'd all need a break. There's been a lot going on this afternoon. So the next question comes from Kerry, and her question is, what would be an effective way to encourage more BAM and working class members and activists to get involved in the Green Party?
A good question. I mean, I think, getting involved in more campaigns that are helping to support more equality across the board is the way to do it, to be good allies, to be listening, to be talking to the NGOs and community groups that are there, build relationships with them. And yeah, this is how we get activists in all different ways. You know, we work with people and then they like us and they feel like we are a place for them to come and be political as well. So I think that's what we need to continue to be doing. I'm really pleased that the Greens of Colour group are now more active, and that in recent months, what we've worked really hard at with their quite recent chair, Aziz Minot, who used to work in my office in City Hall, is to get much better dialogue and coordination and support and with the National Press Office, the National Comms group. So there's now quite a lot of quite continual dialogue, debate and changing, putting things into the agenda that the National Office promote, getting more of our Greens of Colour spokespeople into the national news, having them front issues that Greens of Colour have decided to vote for. The work that was done on the 5 demands for racial justice, that was a collaborative project between HQ and Greens of Colour, and that's the way we've been working more often with the Young Greens recently, and with LGBTIQA plus Greens as well. So making sure that we're supporting campaigns in a way from National Office, giving more prominence. I think that's just much better than it has been in the past. It's very much more integrated, and I think that's structurally and from a party infrastructure point of view, we're in a much better place now. And then the other thing is the Deica Fund. I don't know if you remember, we launched that with an appeal. We've got quite a chunk of money, not loads, but you know, £10,000+ ready to spend on supporting BAME candidates to come forwards for election, to remove barriers, do some training, that kind of thing. And that money hasn't yet been spent, and that's something that Jonathan and I have been concerned about and trying to make sure that we can't just sit there. We've got to get it out there and doing its job. So that's something where I think Greens of Colour are now in charge of that and are going to be making plans, and we're discussing the best way to use that in the most constructive way, to support more people coming forwards for election and building up training. So things like 30 under 30 type stuff for our Greens of Colour, that would be amazing. So yeah, more things like that. But I think we've made some strides. I mean, not just very recently, but over the past year to improve how we integrate our different campaigning work and work with NGOs and work with the party as well.
That's great. Thank you. So last question we'll just quickly touch on comes from our treasurer, Richard Bierman. What do you think is the secret of a successful job share role in the Green Party from your work over the years with Jonathan?
I think it's really important, and what I can't do in this situation is pitch for the leadership, because we're in the election period. So
exactly.
Just shut that down completely. And I don't know to what extent it's appropriate for me to talk about. In general, I would say job share people in any field need to properly work as a team and not just think that you can do half the job, and that it's just splittable down the middle. I think there is a teamwork element. So I used to be a school governor. I'm just diverting to other things now. I used to be a school governor, and we had teachers working as a job share in a number of places, and we were a very progressive school in that respect, in terms of worker the ability of workers to be flexible. But our 2 job share teachers, they shared a role working 3 days a week each with an overlap day, and it isn't just like you do half the work. And so I think it's really important that you do work as a team, that you're in constant conversation with each other, that there's absolutely consistent communication, and that you speak as a pair and as a team always, and you keep each other up to date about what's going on with each other. If you're not doing that, it's far too easy for work to fall between you. Like there's a danger that because there's 2 of you, there won't be responsibility held for the work to be done. And I think it's really important that you both believe that you're both responsible for everything that goes on, and that you'll communicate and share out the work between you. Does that make sense?
No, that's perfect.
Yeah, we actually got free some training from people who were the first people really in sort of executive roles in business. They worked for Marks and Spencers to force a job share onto a big company at a high level, and they learned an awful lot from doing that, and it was many years ago. So they came and gave us advice and help in working together as co-leaders as well. So that was really helpful.